Crypto Clothesline. We're glad to be here with you. Hanging out the crypto laundry. Getting all the crypto info for you. Crypto Clothesline. Crypto Clothesline.
Hi.
Hello.
How's things?
Pretty good. This is weird because we're sitting right next to each other and we literally know how each other's going. So basically for everyone who's listening,
Faking it.
today we're going to be talking about ID. We might as well get on topic because we've got an awesome guest coming up.
She's amazing. Gosh, what an interesting person. I listened to something on YouTube where she helped to organise a thing called Let's Talk Crypto. It was based in Sydney and there were all sorts of big names in there, but the one that I remember the most was the guy from Independent Reserve, that Australian exchange.
She hosted the whole thing.
She did. I believe she's a lawyer, but she's now involved in various blockchain projects. So I'm really interested to hear what they're all about.
She's a smart cookie, that's for sure. We're going to be talking to her about identification and how important it is to have identification available to everybody, because apparently, 1.2 billion people do not have their identification.
Or legally recognised identification.
I mean, we're talking, and everyone's on the bandwagon of let's bank the unbanked. But there's so many people out there who not only do they not have a bank, they don't have any identification. And you know what? The light bulb moment I had was one of the main reasons why people don't have a bank is because they don't have ID. Because when you go, you need to create an account. Mm-hmm. Guess what the banks ask for?
Yeah, you've got to prove who you are.
You've got to prove who you are. They allocate you your own account and it's popped in on their ledger and it's all... Well, let's just say the bank account belongs to you, but the money doesn't. But that's another story.
And your information doesn't either.
That's right.
So this whole notion of an ID, I mean, I really had taken a lot of that for granted coming from a country like Australia that's fairly well organised, if not a little bit controlling over those things. But then, you go to somewhere like Bangkok and how many broke backpackers are there flogging their passports so that they go and get a fake passport made so they can go and flog their passport for another trip to Myanmar or something.
Yeah, I don't really know much about that, but I'm not surprised. Because it's literally either a piece of plastic for your driver's license or a piece of paper or a little book of pages for your passport. I know there's a little bit of technicality there. They've got a microchip in them now. But what Bonnie talks about is that there's actually no real verification of that ID.
Yeah, she used the example. She talked about a male version, like a gynae or a doctor in hospital when you're having a baby. And I thought, well, I've never been to hospital to have a baby, but if I did, like my midwife, she signed my kid's birth certificate saying, this is the daughter, la la la, born at this time. And she signed it. And that went off to the birth, deaths, whatever registrations. And so the birth certificate comes back. But what Bonnie was saying was, how do they know that the person who signed it was actually a registered midwife? How do they know that that midwife or that spokesperson, that medical person, was actually present at the birth of this baby and is not just an invented person or a signature that we've forged her signature? There is no verification.
Well, midwives have a little number that's associated with them once they're registered, but you could just pretend you're there. Like, really.
You could fake it.
You could definitely say, I'm a midwife. Here's the number of a midwife I know. She lives up the backyard.
Yeah.
Or wherever she lives. I mean, I'm sure midwives don't live in the backyard, but...
When I lived in Japan, we used to have to sign our name. So if you signed your name in English, that didn't count. You actually had to sign your name in kanji, and because none of us could really write very well, we had this little bamboo stamp, and anyone could go and get that bamboo stamp made at a bamboo stampery, and that's my name. And so it was Kyasarin in Japanese. That's how they sounded it up. And so they literally chose the closest kanji, the closest, representation.
The swirly Japanese
symbol-y things.
Yeah.
So the kya, the sa, and the rin. And so, I don't know, I think it meant wild beast climbing tree or something.
Oh my God, that's so you.
I'm so totally making it up. But, it works for the purpose.
Trees, beast.
But my point is that I would have to go to my bank in Japan and I couldn't sign my name, which was the recognized way of me identifying myself as a human that I say I am in my culture. In that culture, I had to use the bamboo stamp. Correct me if I'm wrong, but couldn't anyone have gone and got my bamboo stamp? Maybe they didn't didn't have blue eyes and they were in a completely, brown-eyed culture. But still, what I'm trying to say is anyone could have faked being me. They could have been the climbing tree.
You lost me with
wild
bamboo
beast.
stamp, and I was just thinking, holy moly, where the hell do I get a bamboo stamp? I don't even need to be Kiasinia. I just need...
Kiasarin.
Kiasarin.
Kiasarin-chan.
Yeah.
That's the one.
Shoot me.
Where are we going with this? Wish we knew. My whole point is the whole notion of ID. There are different ways of identifying who you are in different cultures. And we sign for shit. But, in that case, I just had to use a little wee bamboo stamp.
The point is, it's worthless. Everything.
Yeah, exactly.
And I still cannot get over this signature BS that we still have to do. It's 2018 and we're still signing, no offense, but like people... They just sign a squiggle. And sometimes you go to the post office, you got to sign for a parcel, and their signing little screen doesn't work. I just draw a straight line. Because that's the only thing that bloody screen can recognise.
And they go, yeah, that's okay.
Yeah,
and they
no
run
worries,
back
see you later.
get back in their van and drive off. Yeah. It's true. I've been picking up parcels on behalf of somebody who's been having stuff sent to my house. So if I'm at my house, right, and somebody gets a package that comes to my house, it happens to be somebody that I know, I just sign for them. And they go, well, are you such and such? And I go, well, no. And they go, it's okay, you just sign for it. So I don't lie. But what if somebody was getting sort of illicit material sent to my house and they were the previous owners or renters there? I mean, my whole point is we can all fake to be anyone.
We absolutely can. To a point. In Australia, it's a little bit harder to fake it. But Bonnie was talking about how in other countries, it's hard to prove you're someone. It's the total opposite. So here it's hard to prove you're someone else, but over there, it's hard to prove that you actually exist on a record anywhere. So that really shocked me. And something else that she talked about, without giving too much about the whole thing away, was the right to be forgotten.
Yes, that was a UN law that was passed in Europe.
That absolutely blew my mind. I had never ever considered that I had a right to be forgotten.
Actually, I don't think it was UN, but it was a law that was passed in Europe. I was just looking at it today, but I'm having a fuzzy.
America.
No, it's a European thing, because in America, the right to be forgotten is not recognised, because all these people are having these different lawsuits with Google, right? And they want to get their personal material taken off various search engines, i.e. Google. So Google went to court with a whole heap of different people, and some of them won. Not everyone, but I think of the, 91,000 cases or something crazy, 45 were recognised. And it was to do with whether the information was relevant. There was a whole series of criteria, right? So people had stuff taken down by Google. But in the States, you cannot have things removed from Google because of the so-called freedom of speech, and freedom of speech doesn't allow for censorship. So no, in the States, that was definitely not the case.
That blew my mind. In Australia, we have all sorts of freedoms, and just the fact that it's not written, though, the right to be forgotten, doesn't mean it doesn't exist. The right to be forgotten should be one of those rights that everybody has. If you don't want your information, or certain hospitals registry, if you don't want your information on the Hotmail email server anymore, if you close your account, you want that completely removed. You have a right to that. And something that really, I think, a really good example of having your right to be forgotten is a platform like Facebook, because when you delete your account, they say, would you like to delete your account? Nothing's ever deleted unless you go through, and even then you can't delete it after you delete all the photos, because I had no Facebook for 7 years and I thought I closed that account 7 years ago, and I reopened my Facebook account 7 years later, and at the beginning of Christmas, the last Christmas just gone, and it asked me if I would like to, these were your old friends, basically. These are the people, it knew who I was. It remembered who I was. And I was just like, geez. And then I Googled it, obviously, and you can't actually remove your information from Facebook. And that's one of the places where I'd love to remove my information.
Absolutely, me too. So this conversation today with Bonnie really, really made my mind race. I sat down afterwards and wrote on about 5 different topics related to it. So it's a really, really stimulating and interesting interview.
Let's have a listen.
Yeah.
Hello.
Hi.
Nice to see you.
Lovely to see you too. You're working in a law firm. Does that mean that you're a lawyer?
or does that mean what?
Yeah. So I am a lawyer, but most of the times for now, the projects that I actually work on would be more in the strategy space, because I think there are really two reasons to it. I think that first and foremost is that, you know, all blockchain companies are like any startup companies. You really need to build a business plan. And that's actually where I see companies as lacking, because you've got these entrepreneurs that, you know, want to do crazy and wild things, which is great. But at the same time, being able to actually say, look, we have a solid team. This is what we know, how much we need to spend. This is how we'll roll it out. I think that these are quite important things. And I think that, you know, you can talk about legal issues, but if you don't have core strategy, right, then what are investors actually buying? Right. Not much, right? And I've got, you know, I work with a couple of people in this strategy. I think that that's really interesting. And the second thing about why less legal now is because it's actually become quite a very complicated area. So most companies have to think about really jurisdictional issues and what you're selling, right? So what you're selling, the characterization of financial product or if it's a security or not, is very complicated and is an evolving space. And I think that by nature, ICOs are global. So apart from having to deal with the issuer side of the legal aspect, everywhere you sell, you in fact actually need advice on where you're selling to. Uh-huh. So whilst I can give an overarching view about what the legal aspects are, I think that it's just one of those things where it's actually quite difficult. And so I do advise on things that you look out for, but no longer the substantial advice, because it's also quite risky and it's changing, at least here in Australia. But I can also talk about that in the context of problems or issues that have come up in the Tykn area where, let's say, privacy laws in Europe have the notion of the right to be forgotten, which means that you have the right to alter your record with organizations that's collected information on you. Now, by definition, a blockchain is decentralized. So how do principles like that fit?
That is fascinating. Yeah.
The right to be forgotten. I love that.
Again, this becomes a jurisdictional issue because in Australia, we don't have that. Privacy laws are centered around organizations, centralized entities collecting data and dealing with it. And now it's decentralized. So who are the people responsible for your privacy and who do you complain to? You know?
Oh, Bonnie, I don't envy your position. Because really everything, like you say, it's there forever. And I have a funny feeling I'm going to do something one day, laundering. And you can't change that. So that's actually quite scary now that you look at that, because that's something we're all used to. Wow.
Yeah. So there was a recent case with Google. I think that really applies to like Google people saying that I've got information that's on Google. It's not controlled by me. I'd like that to be taken down. And so you can appeal to Google, you know, bring a court case and launch it against Google, who controls that information. So traditionally, those ideas are more relevant to central organizations. But yeah, that's also part of what Tykn is dealing with. So happy to talk more about it.
Yes, please. What is Tykn? The technology behind it, why does it exist and why is it special?
So Tykn is working on a digital identity solution, which is to give people without legal identity some form of identification. So just to provide some context to the problem, the UN has come out with a report that says that 1.2 billion people in the world do not have a legal identity, be it because of natural disasters or political reasons where countries don't recognize pockets of their population. So they exist, but actually they're not in the system. So maybe it's a good point to just clarify that we all have our identity regardless of recognition. But the problem really is if you are not legally recognized, you don't have the same access to social safety net or public services or the level of financial inclusion one may take for granted. Yeah. So this is really in the context where Tykn steps in, where they are working on a digital identity system that's resilient. It's a self-sovereign system, but more importantly, it is the system that would unlock the associated services, for example, access to healthcare and education and all the various things that technology can in fact help improve. So the co-founder himself was a refugee and had encountered similar problems, which is the reason why he has actually started this company and is working with Red Cross to actually roll out pilot programs in parts of St. Martin, which is actually just beside BVI. So it's actually a real program that we're rolling out at the moment.
Could I ask again, you said St. Martin, which is actually next to...
It's a very small island beside BVI.
Oh, where's that?
That's actually British Virgin Islands. It's close to Cuba. Every couple of years they were hit by a hurricane, and part of the problem also, it feeds into the privacy discussion that we've been having, is that not-for-profit organizations or humanitarian organizations go in there and provide aid, every couple of years when there is a natural disaster. However, the information that they've collected on the individuals that live there, they have to destroy every time they leave. So every time they have to re-provide the service, they have to go in, actually get people to queue up and line up to register. And each registration is separate. So for each independent charity or humanitarian organization that's there distributing their services, they have to re-record the person every single time. So it takes a very long time. And often people just find that the process can be quite time-consuming. And more importantly, it's really a cost problem because it's so labor intensive that based on the research that we've done, actually 35 cents on the dollar gets to the recipient. And all of that money is just spent trying to move resources, get people to line up, to register, setting up processes. And what we say is if we have an identity system where your identity information is kept with the recipient to begin with, it's very easy to, through technology, just to reconfirm the person with literally a click of a button and improve distribution of cash vouchers or related services instantaneously, along with humanitarian organizations like Red Cross, which is why they're trialing the program specifically in that area.
Wow. That is such a beautiful, it's very practical, but it's got such a beautiful heart-centered humanitarian reason behind it.
I'm pretty excited about those people who, this is pretty sad, so I don't know if we should put this in there. You know how you have people who have babies over in third world countries and they get taken away, and because the parents can't afford to get them registered, it's like they never existed and they can't even prove that they had that child. I'm going to cry. Yeah. But anyway, and they, and if they could just have access to something like this that's there forever, they don't have to walk 10 miles to go to a registration centre and pay all of their tiny little bit of money that they have. I was hoping that something like this would come out, because it absolutely broke my heart when I heard about all these children that were being taken from poor mothers and fathers.
No, I actually completely agree with you. I think, part of the overarching solution also is to say that, yes, our traditional system is that we only recognize identity given to us by governments, but we're saying that in order to actually improve the process in the interim for you to receive these services, so long as you have people in the community that can vouch for you, that information in itself, that attestation service that Tykn, along with other, organizations like Red Cross, can really put the person in good stead to say that, look, despite not being recognized, this is the information, this is what the community has come out and said. It's verified by Red Cross, it's verified by these organizations, and it should definitely improve how quickly they can access these services if needed. So, but it is exactly these problems that we're saying that, look, we want something that's resilient, which means that, it can withstand the failure of governments or institutions.
I've got a question for you, Bonnie. We interviewed another very interesting lady the other week. She's got an amazing project, and that involves, you've heard of the Me Too campaign?
Yes.
So that involves, in a particular small given community, let's say like the acting community, or take Hollywood, where if a perpetrator has committed a crime or committed some sort of abuse, then the victim can go forward and register that on the blockchain. And if, I think it was more than 2 or 3 times from different people, and that person, that information,
has a reputation.
That person has a reputation, exactly. And we were concerned, we loved the idea from the point of view of protecting the victim. We were also concerned from the point of view, if that information is registered and it's there for life, it's immutable, it's on the blockchain, what if it wasn't true? So I'm wondering if, I don't know if it's related at all to what you're doing, but somehow I was finding a connection in my brain, which has just disappeared, whether we have access to alter the information that's been recorded about us.
Yeah. So that's definitely a very interesting point. I think I can respond to that in 2 parts. I think, one, it's true that what the blockchain technology delivers is being able to make information immutable, but it doesn't care whether or not the information is correct or not. So that is actually quite important, because if you do put information that's wrong out there, it does exist. However, there's some ways in which you can mark out that particular block as having edited that in a subsequent block, but that will sort of be a later block that says we're altering the earlier one because of some incorrect information. Second part of it is really, it comes back down to this idea that if you are going to have a system that starts recording people, it needs to be a system of trust, and trust in the sense that, we don't trust every single person to put all sorts of information out there, but it needs to be verified somehow. So the only way to really tackle the problem that we don't even know if that's true or not, is to say, look, we really need some trusted individuals to actually say, this is actually what happened, and put it on the record. But otherwise, it's a very interesting concept. I'm sure the devil's in the detail.
Yes. You've mentioned here the future of cryptocurrencies and where the next big value unlock. I like that wording.
Yeah, that's good.
But in addition to that, when you're answering that, can you indicate to us how you feel that blockchain and similar developing technologies are affecting humankind or will affect humankind? Like how is it changing our world, and in a practical way?
I think that primarily I see really blockchain as improving some of the inefficiencies that we have in the system. And in terms of humanitarian perspective, I think that, for example, we've got in the context of a digital identity solution where it's completely self-sovereign, that actually sidesteps a lot of the privacy issues humanitarian organizations face, because they need to protect the privacy of people, hence they can't keep their record or share the data. But I think it encourages us to fundamentally think about, look, this is not a new problem. We're trying to solve identity problems. We're trying to solve refugees having access to basic services for decades. Why is it that we aren't solving the problem? So I think that if we trace it back to the root cause, that's because they don't have a legal identity, because the natural disasters have actually destroyed the paper-based identity documents, or the fact that governments just don't recognize them. And in instances where governments have failed, does that mean that this person doesn't deserve to have the services that they actually need? They are actually the vulnerable people. I think it's very hard for us to sit in, like a developed country to think that is part of the reason, that is part of the contributing reason why these people are suffering. So once we've identified that, and once we've heard stories about it, and we have actually the technology to leverage to say, look, we can do this near instantaneously and in a more efficient way, why aren't we doing it? So I think in a practical sense, there are actually companies out there, including the one that I'm working with, that's actually trying to make a change. And it's also important because these people have actually been through the process themselves. So they actually have an appreciation about what the pain points are. And I think that that's very important. But bringing it back out to say, what about in the wider context? How does it apply to, for example, financial services or banking systems? I think a lot. In fact, just closer to home here in Australia, our biggest stock exchange has recently adopted blockchain technologies. And just a bit of background for people not as familiar with the Australian market. The ASX here in Australia, as biggest stock exchange, generally, like most stock exchange, they have a couple of days of delays for transactions to go through. And what they've done is that they've actually implemented blockchain, which means that despite the fact that different organizations have to individually collect transaction data and to reconcile before putting the transactions through, one single ledger used by the blockchain is able to instantaneously allow different organizations to clearly see whether or not transactions have gone through. So there's no manual reconciliation going through, which really reduces the time. Yeah. And so it really just becomes a matter of moving that money between organizations, which in my opinion can also, cryptocurrencies can actually help because it's quite instantaneous. But that's not what they've done just yet. They've actually adopted the first part which I've discussed. So I think, look, there are many promises, and in some of the companies that I've been consulting with, big organizations are actually looking into adopting blockchain technology as part of their core businesses and about the future of where I see cryptocurrencies. I don't know what I will say is the future, but I think that it's a really good use case. So if we take a look at the top 100 cryptocurrencies to date, let's say in CoinMarketCap, dare I say that about perhaps 90% of them are utility tokens. And what that means is that they are actually tokens that power and enable the blockchain network to which they operate. And the interesting thing is we have all the discussion about the various cryptocurrencies, but we don't really see a lot of use cases just yet. They are rolling out, but we don't see a lot of that. And where I see the real value unlock, I think, is in the traditional illiquid assets. And what I mean is this. Take the example of, let's say, a solar farm. If one day the project developer has to quickly sell that solar farm onto someone else because they have some form of issues, they just have to on-sell it. The illiquid discount actually means that they have to probably discount the project by anywhere between 10 to 30% in order to quickly sell it, because there's so few people that actually have the balance sheet or financial backing to actually take the project. But if we were able to tokenize these assets and say that they are freely traded on the market, then more people can participate with a lower sum of money, which means that you reduce that illiquidity premium, and therefore it better reflects the market value of that particular asset. So, and if we just take a look at the illiquid premium for infrastructures, that can be a couple of trillions of dollars, which is magnitudes that of cryptocurrencies. So I think that part of the reason why cryptocurrencies are going up and down is because they inherently are not pegged to some form of value. Whereas once you start introducing really tokenized assets that inherently have some form of value, that will really stabilize the market. And I think it'll have a crossover effect on utility tokens, and it will actually give them value because they're actually trying to transact something on the blockchain now, as opposed to just sending tokens here and there.
And back to the humanity aspect in that, it means that, little peeps on the street, not that we're little, but you know what I mean, relatively speaking, in terms of trillions of dollars, we can have a little wee piece of the pie. That's one thing that I really enjoy about the cryptocurrency world, is the fact that, families, and that's what we're largely about, is sharing this information and making it digestible to households so people can actually say, oh, you don't have to be a multimillionaire, you don't have to be a guy, you don't have to be a tech head to actually get a little piece of the pie.
That's exactly right. I mean, I've obviously wanted to own a very expensive car, Lamborghini, obviously. And we were talking to the guy from Bitcar, and he's like, well, you can own a little bit of a Lamborghini if you want. I'm like, see, that's the sort of thing, you can own a little bit of a company, you can own a little bit of a car, you can own a little bit of a project, if it really
resonates
with you.
And it also means that you get to have some access to an asset that can actually ostensibly change the color of your life. If you think about people in the treadmill, if you think about the masses, the 97% that, we're all just crushing it out. We're always working so hard and everything, and it feels like we're sort of on that little mousy wheel. It actually means that people can potentially change the way their future looks, feels, options for their kids. I think it's quite emancipating in many ways. It depends if those big whales create too many splashes for us all. It's hard to know.
But, as I completely agree with what you're saying, being able to even say I'd like access to some form of sort of products, and really anything that you can think of that can be tokenized, is actually quite empowering. But
I'd like a bit of a solar farm, would you?
Yeah.
Well, just to make the world a better place. How about that?
And I would be so excited to be part of an organization like Tykn or something similar, where that you're supporting an organization which is actually affecting real change in people's lives.
Yeah. Is there going to be an ICO or anything like that, or how can other people get involved with Tykn?
Yeah, so without trying to promote it, and this is definitely not my intention of doing that. I'm actually quite independent, but just talking about the project, there will be an ICO. It will be probably 4 or 5 months from now. It won't be anytime soon because they actually want to deliver some results before going into the market. But part of the idea is that because we're still a digital identity service provider, So what that actually means is that for organizations that actually take these Tykn tokens in exchange for services provided, which is sort of backed by Red Cross, people can actually buy Tykn tokens and donate them to people that need these services. And the idea is because everything's on the blockchain, you can actually immediately see the effect of where your money has gone, because it's actually gone to someone at the end who has used that service to buy a piece of bread or have used to onboard themselves into some form of verification attestation services. And that at the moment really is the biggest sort of black hole for charity organizations, because you can go out now and donate $10 and they can tell you where that $10 has gone, but you don't really know which part of the value chain it's gone. Has it gone to people that have worked in the administrative business, or has it actually gone to the recipient at the very end? We don't really know. And research has shown that actually only about 35 cents on the dollar actually goes to the end person. So being able to see the impact will actually be quite important, and I think is a value add for any really charity organization that's looking at blockchain to bring about transparency. So it's really all about transparency.
It's transparency, but it also means that if I contribute $1, let's say, I can see where my, however much it is that, that gets used effectively, my 99 cents or whatever. It's like technology is bringing me closer together, even to a virtual stranger. I mean, we're doing that in the form of a Zoom call, but it's like I can see where my money's being spent, but I can also feel, I've got that instant gratification of a good feeling.
Yeah, exactly. You've got Red Cross, but, and Red Cross is still very important because they're the people on the ground that's actually working to first onboard these people onto the application, because after all, people still need to be first onboarded, and then it's really a self-sufficient process. But being able to extend services and form partnerships with various other organizations that can provide services on the ground and not just purely relying on Red Cross, I think is a very empowering idea. So I think that they're definitely doing some really interesting things, and if it can work, I think that model can be rolled out to a lot of various other countries. But then again, I think that we are really focused on being more practical. So each country or each area will face a different problem, and the idea is just to go and do it and then learn as you go, because there's no perfect model. Like, these countries don't have the infrastructure. It's really from the ground up. So you just have to go do it and not wait till things have become excellent, quote unquote, before you go out.
It's taking action and then and then correcting, isn't it? Like saying, okay, here's the feedback from the action that I took. I need to correct and, alter my course by 1.5 degrees west. What's your favorite saying? What's your favorite quote? Like what's a saying that you draw in when things are getting dark and difficult to get you through?
I keep telling myself that, and perhaps I learned from experiences, if you just keep working hard and keep pushing and put one foot in front of the other, tomorrow will be a better day. And dare say that every time it's worked for me. So even in the most difficult times, I just say, keep pushing every day. Tomorrow will be better.
When I'm doing the write-up on our interviews, I love to engage in what drives each individual. And interestingly enough, most of us have got pretty similar strands. We've got a pretty similar connection. And what's striking me, I've done a lot of travel and lived in a lot of different countries in the course of my lifetime. And how many times if I lose a passport, like people in Bangkok are constantly flogging their passports so they make some money and, they can get a fake one made up. How many times is it so easy to be in the position where you need the help from your embassy, or you need the help from your own government, face in that country in order to help you through. And if you cannot get a straight answer from your own government, I mean, that's something we really take for granted, isn't it?
Yeah, well, if they're in the middle of a war, you're not going to get anything out of it.
But, I lived for 10 years in Italy, and we actually had to carry around an ID card, which I just thought was an absolute scream. I was always leaving home without my ID card. And I don't look Italian. I know that I might just look a little bit, I don't look Italian. And so I was constantly getting stopped on the streets. And also I had a lot of friends who were illegal immigrants. We're all foreigners together. So we would hang out together. And they were like, they said, if we get asked for ID, we're stuffed, but where's yours? Like, you're supposed to be taking care of us. At least one of us has got our ID with us. But it's something you totally take for granted coming from a country as sort of, as loose, I guess, or even in a country you think is, beautiful and pizza-fied as Italy. It's very right.
You know, it's very hardcore.
So when you're in Italy, is it mandatory for you to carry your ID card with you?
All the time. And traffic, say for example, you get stopped for a traffic infringement, the first thing you've got to do is produce your ID, and you've got to show, you know, they are militant, some of those guys. The Italians are really good at taking the mickey out of themselves, and you see films where they personify this militant traffic cop, but they really are. They have incredible powers. They can whack you straight in the slammer if you don't have your ID.
Yeah, so I think the other interesting thing, I think it goes back to the problem really of our identity and how we're given our legal identity, because it's really based on two things. It's based on paper documents that you can easily lose and get lost, and it's based on centralized governments giving you your legal identity, in which so many of the services are dependent on that. And part of the problem is, let's say if you go out with, you need your ID card, you go out, you know, and you travel, even though you're just trying to prove that you are of a certain nationality, or if you know, legally or illegally in a country, you have to provide an ID card over to everyone who wants to check your identity or verify something. And they have your legal, you know, they can have information of your legal age, your name, your address, your place of birth, you know, so much information that they don't actually need. And that's part of the problem, is that, you know, they take a look at this card and they get all the information. Second of all, they can't actually verify whether or not your card is real or not, because the party, which is the institution that has given you your identity, is not actually in the process of verifying your identity. So whilst you've provided that proof, that's actually not verifiable, and that's part of the problem.
Wow, light bulb. You just don't think about this stuff. You're told, yep, you got to get your driver's license, you got to get some ID, get your birth certificate, that's what you need, and that's that. And you walk around with this piece of plastic, and you're right, it could be a piece of plastic from anywhere, you know, lots of people make it themselves, and then you take it to someone who says, yep, that's absolutely all we need.
And you can't actually verify it, can you? Because in order, for example, your birth certificate, if you take a look at your birth certificate, at the very end, generally they would have a signature of the doctor that actually certified that you were in fact born. But most of the time, by the time we actually need to verify ourselves, let's say, you know, I'm my age, I'm not sure if my doctor is still alive. And so how are you going to go verify that this person actually signed this document certifying that you were born?
Yeah.
It's completely just very arbitrary, and it's just a system that we're in.
Seems so archaic. I mean, this is the thing with cryptocurrencies, you know, like why are we still using paper and coins when it could be
just all digital?
Yeah, my mind's blown.
I also think we're getting used to, like, if you're working in the sphere, in the crypto sphere, in the blockchain thinking mode, you're so used to things being instantaneous that actually, I mean, something like our current legal system, I mean, it is like a dinosaur, but it's almost like a comic relief. It's just so incredibly slow, and you know, you're still doing the carbon copies sort of thing, you know, the triplicate and getting things stamped. Take that to a country like Italy, and that is 1,000-fold worse. Where you had to go and get your ID, there were lines going right out onto the street. And if you didn't understand what the military police, that's how they felt, they were really mean. If you didn't understand what they were saying to you, and you might have been in the line for 4 hours, they sent you to the back of the line. And then it closed. I mean, it was a while ago that I was there. I'm sure they're not a lot nicer now. But I was married to a beautiful Italian man. He was able to translate for me. He was a real, you know, people pleaser. Si, signora, si, signora, come vuole. You know, he was really good at all that stuff. And I'm like, oh, they're so rude. And he's going, it's okay, amore. It's okay. Like, don't say anything. You know? And then we were watching other people who were clearly refugees or people with a lower status, you know, so to speak, than the, you know, the classic white privileged people. They were being treated terribly. And they didn't understand the language at all. So, you know.
Okay. Well, I would probably talk for the rest of the year. I should walk into your office and go, right, how can I help you? What do you need me to do? How can we get this done?
But if there is anything we can do from our little perspective over here, then we're super excited to be connected with this and to be able to talk about it and to be able to write about it.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me to have an interview with you guys. You guys are doing some amazing work, honestly. So it's really people like you two that can actually make blockchain or things that are happening in the blockchain more accessible to everyone, and women in particular. So thank you. Thank you for having me.
Wow. What did you think of that?
I don't even know where to start, because there's a lot of points to be considered. The major one, obviously, is the right to be forgotten, which I really, really want to look into a bit more because I'm very much about human rights. Then the fact that there's so many people out there, and I brought this up in the interview about children who are being abducted from third world countries because they don't have an identity. And I've been thinking about how to solve this problem, and this is in my mind the only way to do it. A free way to have your identity stored publicly and available on a blockchain. Like, I'm not sure if this is the purpose of Tykn, but when it comes to children and abductions, this is going to be absolutely epic.
Well, I think it's related in the sense that it's all about creating a digital ID solution on the blockchain. And she used the word self-sovereign, meaning, I guess, that people can get their smartphones and register themselves and their name and get support from various community members. And she also talked about getting support from an aid group or another organization within the community that actually recognizes that you are who you say you are. And I think that will branch out into the areas of ID for children and things like that. I think that Tykn specifically at this stage is looking to address the issues of refugees that have lost all their papers, had all their identification destroyed, and or people that have been the victims of natural disasters. Refugees might be both of the above, but its particular platform is all about addressing issues with adults. But as I did more and more research following this interview, I realized what a huge scope this has for saving children, women stuck in the modern slavery of the sex industry. I mean, it just goes on and on.
Yeah, definitely. And it also secures our own ID. Because at the moment, like she said, it is just, there's a corporation who owns this database of our ID, and if they go down, we go down. So if we're overseas and let's just say the Department of Transport, heaven forbid, gets bombed, and we're over there and we're like, hello, I need help, I've lost my driver's license, or you call the department of whatever it is that deals with passports, you can't contact them. You are one of these people that Bonnie is dealing with, the people that have no identification at all because the piece of paper or the piece of plastic is missing. It's ridiculous. The whole thing that you're still relying on paper.
I was listening to some information by the co-founder of Tykn, and he was saying that he was witnessing other refugees in the camp with him who had all of their academic records lost. So all of their academia, all their studies, all their degrees gone, passports, birth certificates, or I don't think they had passports, but anyway, birth certificates and, other forms of ID that we completely take for granted.
Absolutely.
Yes, quite deep food for thought. Got me thinking about how lucky we are.
Yeah, and it got me excited too, because literally in the space of a couple of years since blockchain was born, up until now, compared to any other technology, I have seen more development, more revolutionary ideas come to fruition than what I've ever seen. That to me means this is a startup, basically. And there's so much momentum occurring. I'm hoping that this problem will be solved within the next year.
Wow.
Because if technology keeps going the way that it is, particularly with blockchain, distributed ledger technology altogether, because we know that blockchain does have a few flaws. I'm just going to throw it out there.
Yep.
So at the moment, I think technology can only get better, and that means that the world using this technology can only get better. I'm just really excited about it.
Well, it's like we had, 20 odd years ago, we had dial-up, and that's just got better. It hasn't meant that we've lost the internet. It just means it's changed in its delivery speed and other aspects. So
oh man, do you remember
blockchain
that?
is going to be similar. Yeah, that sort of beep, 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 beep. Yeah, I remember that. Yeah. Took about 5 minutes to connect.
To load an image.
Yeah, no, this was even just well, I was living in Italy at the time, so you had a phone line that was fairly, 1960s.
Ooh.
Add that with an internet connection, and we were, crazy dudes for trying to get on the internet. Hot diggity dog.
For all our listeners out there, we've decided to allow you to send us some audio messages. We are a podcast, so we encourage all audio messages, and we have a Skype voicemail number. Unfortunately, we publish this on our website, and we have our first, I guess you could call her a hater.
Oh.
She's not a fan. However, she left a few messages.
She's pretty feisty.
She is. And what's her main qualm? So she's left a few messages now, and hopefully we haven't responded. We don't quite know how to respond.
Well, but I mean, also she leaves them in the middle of the night when she knows we can't possibly get back on the line, and it's all quite anonymous as well.
We're going to call her Vera, though.
She is Vera Severa.
She's so severe. She hasn't given us her name. We've just got some random email address. It's going to be interesting to see if we start talking about her, whether she keeps calling.
She's fairly entertaining. You are going to include a couple of her.
I think I might. We've decided, look, if you do leave us a voicemail, we will likely put it on the show.
All right, well, let's talk next week.
Ciao.
Ciao. Hi, you've called Abheeti
And Amy Rose.
at Crypto.
Clothesline.
Leave a message after the
Beep. Okay, 3, 2, 1. Ready?
Now, I don't follow use girls, and I don't follow, crypto and stuff in the news. I just don't follow use, and I don't follow the news, except for the important stuff on the TV at night. However, I did see in a Facebook group that there were mostly blokes talking about crypto. I think you better get your deal straight, ladies. This is not an arena for the ladies. This is a bloke's space. You need to get with it. I can't think of my words just off the top of my head. But I do know that ladies are not supposed to be talking about finances. They're not supposed to be talking about, sciencey things and futuristic things. I mean, keep that for Dr. Spock and Doctor Who. Just go and disappear inside your telephone box, ladies. It is unrealistic what you're trying to achieve here.
Hello. Amy Rose here to make sure you know all about our upcoming webinars and our online crypto courses. So if you know a newbie, if your best friend has no idea what you're talking about when you say Bitcoin, or your mum is totally confused about why on earth you keep talking about invisible money, send them to our webinars. We cut out the tech talk and deliver a jam-packed session of crypto goodness every fortnight. And you're going to need more. So we've built an online course. It's 10 weeks of video tutorials, complimentary consultations where you can talk to myself or to Abheeti. There's quizzes, access to the closed Facebook group just for students with live videos and support, study guides, all without the tech talk, and it's just put simply for non-tech heads. And this is going to teach you everything you need to know about everything you need to get you started in crypto and to make informed decisions. You're going to learn the importance of security because that is our main focus of the course. And at the end, you're going to feel inspired and enriched and part of a community support network that's there to ensure you continue to feel empowered in this ever-evolving space, something that Abheeti and I didn't have when we started out. We virtually had no one, and all we could do was Google. So you've got this in a package delivered just for you. So check out the comments and the notes of our podcast for all the links. Otherwise, we'll see you next week in the podcast where at the end, we're probably going to tell you about our course again.
Crypto Clothesline.